December 19th, 1944, Southern Ardennes, Belgium. 08:47 hours, temperature -12 Celsius. Oberleutnant Karl Weiss lay face down in frozen mud. 3 American shells, 30 seconds. His battery destroyed. He could not breathe, not from the blast, not from the cold, from the impossibility of what had just happened. Weiss was no rookie. 5 years of war, Poland, France, Russia. He knew artillery like a surgeon knows a scalpel. He understood dispersion, wind drift, the 1,000 small errors that made the first shot a prayer and the second a guess. The Americans had needed 3 shells to kill his guns. 3. The first shell landed 30 meters behind gun 3. Close. Too close. The blast threw 2 men sideways. One did not get up. The other crawled, dragging his leg, screaming for a medic. Weiss grabbed his field telephone, started calculating the correction. Standard procedure. The Americans had found his position. Now came the dance. They would fire. He would move. They would adjust. He would counter. The duel would last an hour, maybe 2. He had 40 seconds. The second shell hit 10 meters from the gun pit. The ground jumped. The shockwave slapped Weiss flat. His ears screamed. Snow and dirt rained down. Someone shouted a name he could not hear. He rolled onto his side, spitting mud, and saw gun 3, still there, crew scrambling, trying to return fire. The Americans were walking it in, fast, faster than they should, but still within the rules. Still. The third shell landed directly in the gun pit, dead center. 5 tons of German steel lurched like a dying animal. The howitzer's barrel twisted. The recoil mechanism exploded, spraying hydraulic fluid. The crew vanished in smoke and flame. When the air cleared, 2 men crawled. One sat upright, staring at his hands. Blood ran between his fingers. His mouth moved. No sound came out. Weiss pressed his forehead into the snow. 30 seconds, 3 shells, 1 gun, erased. "How?" he whispered. "How?" No answer. Only the wind, the crackle of flames, the wet sound of someone choking on blood. Weiss had been trained at Jüterbog, the finest artillery school in Europe. He knew the mathematics. Gunnery was geometry. You fired. You waited for the observer's report. You corrected elevation, deflection, charge. You fired again and again. Slowly, patiently, you walked shells onto the target. That was the art, the science, the dance that separated professionals from amateurs. The Americans were not dancing. They were killing. "Lieutenant!" The battery sergeant slid into the ditch beside him, face white, eyes wild. "We have to move, now! They'll destroy—" Another whistle. Weiss grabbed the sergeant and pulled him down. The 4th shell hit between gun 1 and gun 4. The blast picked them both up and slammed them back into the frozen earth. Shrapnel shrieked overhead. A branch the size of a man's arm landed where Weiss had been kneeling. He rolled onto his back, stared at the gray sky, counted his heartbeat. 1, 2, 3, still alive. Gun. 3 burned. Black smoke twisted into the clouds. Friedrich's body lay at the edge of the pit, one arm stretched toward his coffee cup, still steaming in the snow, still full. He had not taken a single sip. Weiss looked away. Another shell, this one farther left. Gun 2's position. The howitzer tilted, trail blown off its mount. The crew scattered. One man stumbled, fell, did not get up. The radio at Weiss's hip crackled. "Under accurate fire, can't locate the battery, losing guns. How are they doing this?" Static. Silence. Then another voice, younger, panicked. "Hartmann's battery is gone. 4 guns destroyed in 2 minutes. What do we—" The transmission cut off. An explosion in the background. Screaming. Then nothing. Weiss's hands shook. He clenched them into fists. All along the line, the same story. German batteries pinned, suppressed, destroyed, by an enemy that fired as if they could see through fog and forest, as if every shell had eyes. "Lieutenant, orders!" The sergeant was on his knees, gripping Weiss's shoulder. "What do we do?" Weiss forced himself to think. The Americans had observers. He knew that. Forward spotters with radios, calling corrections. So did the Germans. That was not new. But corrections took time, minutes. You fired a ranging shot. You waited. You adjusted. You fired again. The cycle ate time because artillery was blind, firing over hills at targets miles away. Unless something had changed, unless the Americans had found a way to aim that did not rely on experience, on steady hands, on perfect conditions. Weiss remembered a rumor, a captain in Normandy, drunk, talking too much, something about American guns with special sights, gyroscopes, spinning wheels that held the aim steady even when the gun shook. Engineering magic. Impossible. Weiss had laughed. He was not laughing now. "Move the guns," he said. His voice sounded dead in his own ears. "Fall back to secondary positions. Leave the wounded. Go." The sergeant ran, shouting orders. Engines coughed to life. Men scrambled toward the surviving howitzers. Gun 1 lurched forward, wheels spinning in the snow. Gun 4 followed, trailing smoke. Weiss stood alone in the middle of the position. Around him, craters, broken metal, bodies. Friedrich face down, coffee cup untouched. A loader with no legs, still breathing, staring at the sky. A shell casing, dented, half buried in frozen mud. This was not war as he knew it. This was execution. He looked toward the American lines, could not see them. Only trees, mist, the low, bruised sky. But somewhere out there, hidden in a clearing or behind a ridge, an American crew worked their gun, loading, aiming, firing. And inside that gun's sight, Weiss now understood, was something small, something new. A wheel spinning thousands of times per minute, holding one line steady while the rest of the world shook. A tiny piece of metal. And it had just changed the war. The half-track engine roared. The sergeant leaned out, waving him forward. Weiss climbed in. His boots slipped on ice. His hands, when he gripped the rail, did not shake. Professional, steady. But inside, something had broken. He had spent 5 years mastering his trade, 5 years learning the art of indirect fire, the science of ballistics, the patience required to walk shells onto a target. And in 30 seconds, 3 American shells had made all of it irrelevant. The half-track lurched forward. Weiss sat in silence. Around him, his men, what was left of them, huddled in wet uniforms, faces blank, hands wrapped around rifles they had not fired. The radio hissed. "All batteries report status. Second battery, 4 guns lost, withdrawing. 5th battery, no contact. How are they doing this? How—" Static, then silence. Weiss closed his eyes. In his mind he saw the American gunner. Young, maybe. Green. A farm boy from Iowa or Texas who 6 months ago had never seen a howitzer. But now, with that sight, with that tiny spinning wheel, he fired like a master. Faster, more accurate, more deadly than veterans with decades of training. That was the truth Weiss could not escape. The Americans had not beaten him with courage, not with numbers, not with better soldiers. They had beaten him with engineering, and there was nothing he could do about it. The half-track rolled through the forest. Snow fell. The sky darkened. Somewhere ahead, the war continued. But Karl Weiss, staring at his hands, steady and professional and useless, whispered into the cold, "What the hell did they put in those guns?" No one answered. Behind them, gun 3 still burned. Friedrich's coffee steamed in the snow, and somewhere, miles away, an American battery loaded another shell. September 1940. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. 14:20 hours. Temperature 28 degrees Celsius. Engineer William Schneider stood beside the smoking barrel of a 155mm howitzer and stared at the white stakes downrange. 30 shots fired, 19 hits, 11 complete misses. His hands would not stop shaking. Schneider was 34 years old, tall, thin, with fingers permanently stained black from gun oil. He had been designing artillery since 1936, when the United States Army discovered it had almost no modern heavy guns and needed them immediately. 4 years of work, thousands of hours, and now, watching the scattered impact markers, he understood with cold certainty that he had built a weapon that could not win a war. Captain Robert Hayes walked toward him carrying a clipboard. His face showed nothing. That terrified Schneider more than anger would have. "Same firing solution every time?" Hayes asked, his voice flat. "Identical," Schneider said. "Same crew, same ammunition, same everything." Hayes wrote something. His pen scratched too loud in the silence. They walked downrange together. Neither spoke. The September heat pressed down. Grasshoppers clicked in the weeds. Somewhere a truck engine idled. The first impact marker stood 47 meters short of the target, the second 63 meters over, the third 31 meters left, the fourth 22 meters right. A pattern of failure scattered across 400 meters of Maryland scrub. "The gun?" Hayes asked. "Perfect." "The crew?" "Best we have, trained at Fort Sill." "Then what the hell is wrong?" Schneider stopped walking, looked back at the howitzer. 5 tons of American steel sitting silent on its platform, barrels still radiating heat, looking for all the world like it should work. "Physics," he said quietly. "Physics is wrong." Hayes stared at him. Schneider explained. "When a 155mm howitzer fires, 40 tons of recoil force slams through the weapon. The gun rolls backward half a meter. The barrel shudders. The carriage shakes. The ground compresses unevenly. Everything moves, and bolted to the top of this chaos sits the sight, moving with every vibration, every tremor, every microscopic shift. Between shots, Schneider said, the crew re-aims. The gunner waits for everything to settle. He checks the sight, makes corrections, signals ready. Then he fires and the whole thing starts over. And even then, something shifts. The ground, the temperature, something. The next shell scatters. "The Germans manage," Hayes said. Schneider felt something snap inside his chest. "The Germans have been doing this for 20 years. His voice came out too loud. 20 years of training, veteran crews, perfect doctrine. We have 6 months and farm boys who have never seen a gun." Hayes said nothing, just looked at him. Schneider forced himself to breathe. "I spoke with a British officer last month," he said quietly. "Arras, May 1940. British guns fired 80 shells at a German battery. 4 hits. The Germans replied with 30 shells and destroyed 3 British guns." He looked at Hayes. "The British officer said the Germans fired as if they knew exactly where his guns stood, but they did not know. They just shot more accurately." Hayes closed his clipboard. "Fix it," he said. "I do not care how, but fix it." He walked away, boots crunching on gravel, leaving Schneider alone with the gun and the white stakes that marked 11 failures. That night, Schneider sat in his office unable to sleep. The wooden building creaked in the wind. His desk lamp threw harsh shadows across blueprints that suddenly looked like lies. He kept seeing the impact markers, scattered, random, useless. He kept hearing haze. Fix it. He kept thinking about boys. American boys, 18, 19 years old, sent to Europe with guns that could not hit their targets, facing German veterans who would kill them before they figured out what went wrong. His hands shook again. He pressed them flat on the desk. On the wall, a photograph. Sent 3 weeks ago from a training officer at Fort Bragg. A gun crew, 7 men, young faces, smiling. The letter attached said they would ship to England in November. Schneider stared at their faces. If he could not fix this, those boys would die. Not maybe, not possibly. They would die because their gun lied to them about where it aimed. He stood up, paced, thought. The crew could not get better fast enough. The gun itself was as good as American engineering could make it. The carriage was solid. That left the sight. What if you made a sight that did not move with the gun? What if you created something that stayed stable no matter what happened around it? Schneider stopped pacing. He had seen this before. Not in artillery, in aircraft. He pulled down a technical manual from his shelf. Aircraft Instruments, 1938 edition. Flipped to the section on artificial horizons, gyroscopes, a spinning wheel mounted to rotate freely in any direction. Once spinning fast enough, it resisted any attempt to change its orientation. Physics, angular momentum. The faster it spun, the more stubbornly it held position. Aircraft used them to stay level in clouds. German submarines used them to keep torpedoes running straight. But artillery? No one had tried. Schneider understood why. An airplane moved smoothly. A submarine glided through water. A howitzer exploded. The forces would be immense, brutal. Any gyroscope would have to survive recoil shock that could shatter steel, and keep spinning, keep working. Impossible. He sat down, pulled out blank paper, started sketching anyway. What if the gyroscope was isolated from the gun, suspended, protected? What if the sight was attached to the gyroscope instead of to the gun? The gun could shake. The gyroscope would not care. It would hold its line in space. The sight would hold its aim. The gunner would see steady crosshairs even while the weapon bucked around him. Beautiful on paper, probably impossible in reality. Schneider worked until dawn, drew diagrams, ran calculations. When the sun came up, he had a concept and no idea if it would work. On September 18th, he presented the idea to Colonel Marcus Wade, head of artillery development. Wade was 51, gray-haired, a veteran who had fired French 75s in the First World War. He listened without interrupting. When Schneider finished, Wade sat silent for a long moment. "You want to put a gyroscope in a gun sight," he said finally. "Yes, sir." "Has anyone done this before?" "No, sir." "Do you know if it will work?" "No, sir." Wade walked to the window, looked out at the proving ground. When he turned back, his face was hard. "You get 4 months," he said. 4. If it works, we go to production immediately. If it does not work, we train crews harder and pray." He pointed at Schneider's sketches. "And if it does not work," Wade said quietly, "a lot of American boys are going to die because their guns cannot hit what they aim at." Schneider left with authorization and 4 months to do the impossible. He assembled a team. John McPherson, a machinist who could work metal to tolerances most considered theoretical. David Klein, an electrical engineer. Marie Fontaine, a French physicist who had fled Paris and knew more about gyroscopes than anyone in America. They worked in a converted warehouse. 12-hour days, 7 days a week. October 15th, the first prototype. They mounted it in a test site, took it to the range, fired 6 shots. On the 7th, the bearings shattered. Metal fragments sprayed across the firing platform. The gyroscope died with a grinding shriek. McPherson picked up the pieces, said nothing. His face said everything. November 3rd, the second prototype. New bearings, reinforced housing, 50 successful shots. Everyone started to believe. On the 51st, the rotor cracked. Metal fatigue. The gyroscope wobbled, slowed, stopped. Schneider stood in the warehouse that night, staring at the broken rotor. His team had gone home. He was alone. The building was cold, his breath fogged. He picked up the rotor, held it in both hands. 180 grams of aluminum alloy, machined for 3 weeks, balanced to perfection, destroyed in 1 second. He wanted to throw it, wanted to scream, wanted to smash something. Instead, he set it down gently and sat on the floor with his back against a workbench. 4 months, Wade had said. 2 months gone. 2 prototypes failed. On the wall, he had tacked the photograph from Fort Bragg. 7 young men, smiling. "I am trying," Schneider whispered to their faces. "I am trying." December came. The temperature dropped below freezing. They tested the 3rd prototype in the cold. The synthetic lubricant turned to sludge. The gyroscope seized. Useless. Klein threw a wrench across the warehouse. It hit the wall with a bang that echoed. "It will not work," he shouted. "We are trying to do something impossible." Schneider said nothing, just stared at the frozen gyroscope. That night he did not go home, sat at his desk, looked at the photograph. 7 faces. How many of them were already dead? How many would die because he failed? His hands shook. He clenched them into fists. January 1941. The 4 months were gone. Wade came to the warehouse, looked at the 3 broken prototypes lined up on a bench like corpses. "Well?" he asked. "We need more time," Schneider said. His voice sounded hollow. Wade was silent for a long moment. "The world is burning, Schneider. Britain barely holding. Our boys will be over there soon. Months, not years." "I know. Do you?" Wade stepped closer. "Do you know what happens when green crews face German veterans?" "I do. I saw it in 1918. We lost entire batteries in minutes. Men who never got a second shot." Schneider looked at the photograph on the wall. "Keep working," Wade said quietly. "I will buy you what time I can." He left. The team kept working. McPherson redesigned the rotor. Lighter, hollow core, internal bracing. Weight, 180 grams. So perfectly balanced it spun for 11 minutes after power cut. Klein built a new motor, 24 volts, 40 watts. Sealed, shock-mounted, could reach 8,000 revolutions per minute in under 2 minutes. Fontaine solved the bearing problem. New steel, new lubricant that stayed liquid at -30 and did not break down at +50. February 12th, 1941. The 4th prototype. They mounted it in a modified M12 sight. Took it to the range. Wade came. Hayes came. A dozen officers stood behind the gun, silent, waiting. Corporal Jimmy Davis sat in the gunner's seat. He looked at Schneider. Schneider nodded. "Target, 12,000 meters," Wade ordered. 10 rounds, no adjustments. Davis laid the sight. Inside the housing, invisible, the gyroscope spun. 8,000 revolutions per minute, holding one line steady in space. "Ready," Davis said. "Fire!" The gun roared, recoiled, smoke rolled. Downrange, an observer radioed back. "Impact, 8 meters short." Not perfect, but close, very close. "Fire." Second shot. "Impact, 3 meters over." Third shot. "Direct hit." Fourth shot. "Direct hit." Fifth shot. "Direct hit." Wade said nothing, watched through binoculars. His face showed nothing. They fired all 10 rounds. 8 hit within 5 meters of the aiming point, the other 2 within 10 meters. When the smoke cleared, Wade lowered his binoculars, turned to Schneider. His eyes were wet. "Do that again tomorrow," he said. "Make sure it was not luck." They tested for 2 weeks. Different crews, day and night, hot and cold. The results held. Dispersion down 62%. Aiming time cut from 2 minutes to 40 seconds. Green crews shooting like veterans. March 3, 1941. The Army ordered 2,400 M1 howitzers with the stabilized sight. Production began in April. On June 8th, Schneider received a letter from a captain in the field, postmarked North Carolina. He opened it with shaking hands. "Your sight works. My crew, all green recruits, outshot a veteran unit in exercises yesterday. First time we beat anyone. The boys are confident now. They believe in their gun. I do not know what you did, but you gave them a fighting chance. Thank you." Schneider sat at his desk holding the letter, read it 3 times. Then he looked at the photograph on the wall. 7 young faces smiling. He did not know their names, did not know if they were still alive, but he knew they had a chance now. A single tear ran down his cheek. He did not wipe it away, just sat there in the quiet office holding a letter that said his hands had finally stopped shaking for a reason. In November 1942, the first M1 howitzers with stabilized sights landed in North Africa. German artillery officers would spend the next 3 years trying to understand why they were dying. November 22, 1942, Kasserine Pass, Tunisia. 0547 hours. Temperature 9 degrees Celsius. Captain Robert Moore crouched in a shallow hole scratched into North African rock and watched German tanks moving through the morning mist. 4 Panthers, maybe 5. Hard to count through the dust and heat shimmer. Big machines, dark gray, moving fast toward American positions that had held for exactly 3 days and were about to break. Moore was 26 years old, from Iowa. 6 months ago, he had been training recruits at Fort Sill. Now he commanded Battery A, 17th Field Artillery Regiment, 6 M1 howitzers, 42 men. Most of them had never been shot at before yesterday. Behind him, Sergeant Thomas Briggs worked the radio, calling for fire support that was not coming. The infantry was pinned. The command post was retreating. American units all along the valley were falling back or being overrun. This was Kasserine, the first real test of American forces against the Wehrmacht, and so far the Wehrmacht was winning. "Captain!" Briggs shouted over the engine noise. "Command says fall back. German armor breaking through on the left. We are about to be cut off." Moore looked at his guns. 6 howitzers dug into firing positions. Ammunition stacked, crews ready. Everything he had worked for since landing in Africa 2 weeks ago. Then he looked at the valley. American infantry out there, spread thin, taking fire. No artillery support because every other battery was retreating or already gone. If he pulled out now, those men died. "We stay," Moore said. Briggs stared at him. "Sir, if we stay, the Germans will roll right over us. Then we better shoot fast." Moore crawled to gun 1. Corporal Eddie Walsh sat in the gunner's seat, hands on the traversing wheel, eyes locked on the valley. Walsh was 19, from Boston, joined the Army because his father had fought in the last war. This was his first real battle. "You see them?" Moore asked. "Yes, sir. 4 tanks, maybe 2,000 meters out, moving east." "Can you hit them?" Walsh looked at him. His face was pale. Sweat ran down his temples despite the cold. "I do not know, sir. I have never shot at tanks before." None of them had. This battery had fired exactly 340 rounds in training. The German crews out there had fought across Poland, France, Russia. Thousands of rounds, years of experience. Moore thought about the sight mounted on Walsh's gun, the M12A7, the gyro-stabilized unit that Schneider and his team had built back in Maryland, the sight that was supposed to let green crews shoot like veterans. Time to find out if it worked. "Walsh," Moore said quietly. "You trust your gun?" Walsh swallowed, nodded. "Then lay on that lead tank. Fire when ready. Do not wait for my order. Just fire." "Yes, sir." Moore crawled back to his position, grabbed the radio handset. "All guns," he said. "Target, enemy armor, valley floor, 2,000 meters. Fire at will. I say again, fire at will. No elaborate fire plan, no careful bracketing, no time for any of that. Just point and shoot and hope the sights did what they were supposed to do." Gun 1 fired first. The howitzer roared. Flame punched from the muzzle. The gun recoiled smoothly, hydraulics absorbing the shock. Walsh, already working the traversing wheel, making a tiny correction Moore could barely see. Downrange, the shell fell. Moore watched through binoculars, counted seconds. 1, 2, 3. The shell hit 30 meters in front of the lead Panther. Dirt and rock erupted. The tank kept coming. Close, very close. Closer than any first shot had a right to be. "Adjust," Walsh shouted to his loader. "Up 50." Gun 1 fired again. 28 seconds after the first round. Fast. Faster than Moore had ever seen a crew work. This time the shell landed 10 meters behind the tank. Bracket. Walsh made another correction. Smaller, more precise. His hands steady on the sight despite the chaos around him. The gyroscope inside spinning at 8,000 revolutions per minute, holding his aim true even as the gun settled from recoil. The third shot hit. Not near the tank. Not close to the tank. Into the tank. The shell struck the Panther's side armor and detonated. Smoke poured from the engine compartment. The tank lurched, slowed, stopped. The crew bailed out, running. Moore felt something cold run down his spine. 3 shots, 3 corrections, 1 kill in less than 2 minutes. "Gun 2, 3, 4, he shouted into the radio. "Engage remaining armor. Move, move, move." The battery opened fire. Not a coordinated salvo, just 6 guns working independently, each crew finding targets, making corrections, firing as fast as they could load. The valley erupted in smoke and thunder. A second Panther took a hit to the turret. The shell punched through. Fire bloomed inside. The tank kept moving for another 50 meters before it stopped, burning. A third tank tried to maneuver, turned hard left, exposed its thinner side armor to gun 4. Sergeant Mike Donovan put a shell through it at 1/800 meters. The tank shuddered, rolled forward another few meters, then exploded as the ammunition cooked off. The remaining German tanks stopped, turned, started backing up through their own dust. They were retreating. Moore could not believe what he was seeing. German tanks retreating from American artillery. "Keep firing," he shouted. "Do not let them regroup." The battery poured rounds downrange. 47 shells in 12 minutes. The valley disappeared in smoke and dust. When it cleared, 3 Panthers sat burning. The others had pulled back beyond effective range. Moore lowered his binoculars. His hands were shaking. Not from fear, from something else. Something he could not name. Briggs crawled up beside him. His face was black with powder smoke, his eyes wide. "Sir," he said quietly, "what the hell just happened?" Moore looked at his guns. 6 howitzers, 42 men, most of them still alive, still in position, still ready to fight. "We just won an artillery duel," Moore said. "Against Germans?" "Against Germans." They sat in silence for a moment. The sound of gunfire echoed across the valley. Somewhere American infantry was cheering. Moore could hear them even from a kilometer away. That afternoon, a German reconnaissance team found the American battery position. They studied it carefully, measured distances, counted shell craters, tried to understand what had happened. Oberleutnant Kurt Werner wrote in his report, American 155mm artillery demonstrates unusual accuracy, destroyed 3 Panther tanks in rapid succession at ranges exceeding 1,800 meters. Cause unknown. Recommend capture of equipment for study. The report went to Berlin. Analysts read it, dismissed it as exaggeration. Tank losses to artillery were rare. American artillery was known to be inexperienced, poorly trained, ineffective. They did not understand yet, but they would. January 22, 1944, Anzio, Italy. EO 6:30 hours. Captain James Kowalski stood in a muddy gun pit 3 kilometers behind the beach and listened to the sound of German artillery walking toward his position. Impact. Closer. Impact. Closer still. The enemy had his range. In about 2 minutes, shells would start landing directly on his battery. Kowalski commanded Battery C, 191st Field Artillery Battalion. 6 M1 howitzers. 38 men. They had been at Anzio for 6 days. 6 days of constant German counterattacks. 6 days of holding a narrow beachhead while the enemy tried to push them back into the sea. The artillery duel here was different from Kasserine, more intense, more professional. The German gunners were veterans, Eastern Front survivors. They knew their trade. But Kowalski's crews knew something the Germans did not. "Fire mission," he shouted. "Enemy battery, coordinates from observer. Range 8,400 meters." His forward observer, Lieutenant Dan Foster, was crouched in a shell hole 400 meters forward. He had spotted the flash of German guns firing, called in the coordinates. Now everything depended on speed. Gun 1 fired 42 seconds after the request. Fast, very fast. The shell arced out over the Italian countryside, landed in a vineyard 30 meters short of the German position. "Short 3-0, Foster radioed back. Gun 1 corrected. Fired again. 28 seconds later. "On target. Fire for effect." The entire battery opened fire. 6 guns. Sustained fire. 36 shells in 4 minutes. The German position disappeared under explosions. When the smoke cleared, Foster reported 3 guns destroyed, crews scattered. The German counter-battery fire stopped. Silence. Kowalski checked his watch. From first shot to suppression, 4 minutes, 18 seconds. That same day, 600 meters from Kowalski's position, a German battery received a similar fire mission. Suppress an American strongpoint, range 7,900 meters. The German crew was experienced, veteran gunners, good equipment. They followed doctrine perfectly. First shot, 1 minute after the order. Miss, 50 meters left. Second shot, 35 seconds later. Miss, 20 meters right. Third shot, short. Fourth shot, finally on target. More than 3 minutes from first shot to first hit. And by then, the Americans had taken cover. Minimal casualties. German Lieutenant Karl Eberhardt wrote in his diary that night, "The Americans have some kind of extraordinary artillery. They work so fast and so accurately that we cannot respond. Observers say from first shot to first hit, less than 1 minute. It seems impossible, yet it is true." Over 4 months at Anzio, American artillery fired approximately 1.2 million shells. The Germans fired roughly 1.8 million. But the loss ratio did not favor the Wehrmacht. For every American gun destroyed, the Germans lost 1.4 of their own. Statistics were cold numbers, but behind them were lives. American crews survived more often because their guns shot more accurately, because a small gyroscope spun at 8,000 revolutions per minute and held aim steady no matter what happened around it. March 7, 1945, Remagen, Germany, 14:20 hours. The Ludendorff Bridge still stood, damaged, smoking, but intact. American forces had captured it hours earlier. Now they had to hold it. German High Command understood what it meant. If the Americans secured the East Bank, the war was over. Everything had to be thrown at Remagen. Everything. Artillery became the key. Dozens of German guns positioned in the hills, firing constantly at the bridge and the forces trying to cross. The Americans responded with the largest concentration of artillery in the European theater, 348 guns, from 105 mm to 240 mm. Of those, 72 were M1 howitzers with stabilized sights. Major William Cross commanded one of the M1 batteries. His mission: counter-battery fire. Find German guns, destroy them before they destroyed the bridge. The tactic was called spot-correct salvo. Simple, brutal, effective. A forward observer spotted the flash of an enemy gun, radioed coordinates. One M1 fired a single round. The observer corrected. A second round walked onto target. Then the entire battery opened fire. Average time from detection to suppression: 3 minutes, 30 seconds. The Germans could not match that speed. Their counter-battery doctrine required careful measurement, multiple ranging shots, deliberate corrections. By the time they bracketed a target, it had already moved or been reinforced. On March 11th, a German battery of 150 mm guns fired at the bridge from 11 kilometers away. 3 shots. One hit the western approach. One landed in the river. One struck a support pier. An American forward observer fixed the flash, transmitted coordinates. An M1 battery replied within 90 seconds. First round, 25 meters from the German position. Second round, direct hit. The crew was silenced. Time from flash to destruction: 2 minutes, 10 seconds. No elaborate plan, no complex fire control, just speed, precision, the ruthless efficiency of a system that let young crews kill veteran gunners before they could react. By the end of March, the Allies were across the Rhine on a broad front. German artillery had been systematically destroyed, not by superior numbers, not by better training, by better technology. April 15, 1945. Berlin, Germany. Major General Rudolf von Pappenheim sat in the ruins of the Army Ordnance Office and read the final reports from Remagen. American artillery had dominated every engagement. German batteries took unacceptable losses. Experienced crews were being killed faster than they could be replaced. Pappenheim had ordered studies. Engineers had examined captured M1 howitzers, disassembled them, measured everything. They found the gyroscope in the sight, a small aluminum rotor, precision bearings, a simple electric motor. Nothing revolutionary. Nothing Germany could not build. Except they could not build it. Not anymore. The steel for the bearings required nickel and molybdenum alloys. Germany had no nickel. The synthetic lubricants needed chemicals from refineries that had been bombed into rubble. The precision machine tools had been destroyed or captured. In December 1944, Krupp engineers had tried to develop a German equivalent, Project Zielfernrohr 44. By January, the project was dead. No resources, no time, no hope. Pappenheim closed the report, set it on his desk. Outside, Soviet artillery was pounding the city. The war was ending. He thought about a small gyroscope, a spinning wheel, 180 grams of aluminum, an idea that had changed everything. The Germans had possessed the best artillery tradition in Europe. 20 years of development, veteran crews, perfect doctrine, and they had lost to American farm boys with 6 months of training and a better tool. That was the truth. Cold, final, undeniable. Pappenheim stood, walked to the window, watched smoke rise over Berlin. The Reich that was supposed to last 1,000 years had barely lasted 12. In the end, it had not been ideology or will or racial superiority that decided the outcome. It had been engineering. May 8, 1945. Germany surrendered. Captain Moore was in Austria. Captain Kowalski in northern Italy, Major Cross at a forward command post in Czechoslovakia. They heard the news over field radios. Some men cheered, some wept, some sat in silence, too exhausted to feel anything. Moore sat beside his gun, Gun 1, the same howitzer that had destroyed a panther at Kasserine more than 2 years ago. The barrel was worn, the paint was gone, the metal was scarred and dented, but it still worked. He ran his hand along the sight. The M12A7, the gyro-stabilized unit that had let him and his crew survive when they should have died. Inside that sight, invisible, a small gyroscope sat silent now. Not spinning, not working, just a piece of metal. But for 3 years, it had been more than that. It had been the difference between hitting and missing, between living and dying, between winning and losing. Moore thought about Schneider, the engineer he had never met, the man who had built this weapon in a warehouse in Maryland while Moore was still training recruits at Fort Sill. He wondered if Schneider knew, if anyone had told him, that his invention had worked, that it had saved lives, that it had helped win a war. Moore hoped someone had, because that small gyroscope, that simple spinning wheel, had done what doctrine and training and courage alone could not do. It had taken the chaos of artillery and made it precise. It had taken green crews and made them deadly. It had taken an army that should have lost and given it a weapon that let it win. And somewhere in Maryland, in a quiet office with blueprints on the walls, William Schneider received a letter. It was from Moore, short, direct, written in pencil on dirty paper. "Your sight worked. We won. Thank you." Schneider read it 3 times. Then he folded it carefully and put it in his desk drawer next to the photograph of 7 young soldiers. 4 of them had come home. 3 had not. But 4 was better than none. And none was what it would have been without the gyroscope. Schneider sat in the silence of his office and let himself cry for the first time since the war began. His hands did not shake any more. April 30th, 1945. Berlin, Germany. Army Ordnance Office, Tiergarten District. 1640 hours. Major General Rudolf von Pappenheim sat in a basement that smelled of damp concrete and burning paper and listened to Soviet artillery destroy what remained of the Third Reich. Outside, the city burned. Inside, filing cabinets stood open, their contents scattered across the floor. Technical drawings, test reports, captured equipment studies. 3 years of desperate attempts to understand why German artillery was losing a war it should have won. On the desk in front of Pappenheim lay a disassembled American artillery sight, the M12A7, serial number 1847, captured at Remagen 2 months ago, studied, measured, understood. Too late. Pappenheim was 52 years old. He had commanded artillery in the First World War, spent 20 years rebuilding German doctrine after Versailles. He knew more about gunnery than any man in Europe, and none of it had mattered. He picked up the small aluminum rotor from the sight, held it in his palm. 180 grams, perfectly balanced, machined to tolerances he could barely measure. This tiny wheel, this simple gyroscope, had changed everything. A shell landed close. The building shook. Dust fell from the ceiling. Pappenheim did not move, just sat holding the rotor, turning it slowly in his fingers. 3 years ago, after Kasserine, the first reports had arrived. American artillery firing with unusual accuracy. German batteries taking unexpected losses. The analysts had dismissed it. Exaggeration. Inexperience. American crews would learn. The problem would solve itself. It had not solved itself. More reports. Tunisia, Sicily, Italy. Always the same story. American guns hitting faster, more precisely than doctrine said they should. Green crews outperforming veterans. Impossible, yet true. In August 1944, after Normandy, Pappenheim had finally received a captured M1 howitzer intact. His engineers stripped it completely, found the gyroscope in the sight, a revelation and a condemnation. The principle was simple, brilliant, obvious in hindsight. The gyroscope created a stable reference point independent of the gun's movement. The sight stayed steady even when the howitzer recoiled. The gunner saw a fixed aim. Corrections were fast, accurate, repeatable. Why had no one in Germany thought of this? Pappenheim knew the answer. They had been too confident, too certain that their training, their doctrine, their 20 years of experience would be enough. They had looked for complex solutions, better fire tables, more rigorous training, improved meteorological data. The Americans had looked at the gun itself and asked a simpler question. How do we make the sight not move? In December 1944, Pappenheim had authorized Project Zielfernrohr 44, a crash program to develop a German gyroscopic sight. Krupp engineers worked day and night. By January, they had a prototype. By February, they had a working model. It did not matter. The bearings required nickel alloys Germany no longer had. The synthetic lubricants needed chemicals from refineries that had been bombed into rubble. The precision machine tools were destroyed or captured. Even if they could build the sights, there were no guns left to mount them on. Another shell. Closer. The lights flickered. Somewhere above, men shouted in Russian. Pappenheim set the rotor back on the desk, looked at the scattered reports, numbers that told a story of systematic defeat. Kasserine, February 1943. First engagement. American Battery A, 17th Field Artillery, destroyed 3 Panthers in 12 minutes. Loss ratio, 3-0. The Americans had won by accident, not knowing their own advantage yet. Anzio, January 1944. Battery C, 191st Field Artillery, suppressed a veteran German battery in 4 minutes, 18 seconds. 3 German guns destroyed. 0 American casualties. The advantage was no longer accidental. Normandy, June 1944. Systematic counter-battery operations. American M1 howitzers with forward observers destroying German positions faster than they could be reinforced. The Allies achieved fire superiority not through numbers, but through precision. The Ardennes, December 1944. Weiss. The officer whose battery had been destroyed in 30 seconds by 3 American shells. His report had been the most detailed, the most honest, the most damning. Pappenheim had read it 20 times. Weiss described the impossible becoming real, shells landing as if guided, corrections so fast there was no time to respond, a dance that had become an execution. After the Ardennes, Pappenheim had known the war was lost, not because of tanks or aircraft or manpower, because German artillery, the pride of the Wehrmacht, could no longer control the battlefield. The door opened. A young lieutenant stood there, face black with powder smoke, uniform torn. "Herr General, the Soviets are 3 blocks away. We must evacuate now." Pappenheim shook his head slowly. "There is nowhere to evacuate to, Lieutenant." "Sir, if we stay, we die. If we leave, we die somewhere else. It does not matter any more." The lieutenant hesitated, then saluted and left. Pappenheim stood, walked to the window. The glass was cracked, held together by tape. Outside, Berlin burned. Smoke rose in thick columns. Artillery flashes lit the sky. Soviet artillery, massed batteries firing in the old way, volume over precision. It was working because there was nothing left to oppose it. He thought about the American engineer who had built the gyroscopic sight, Schneider. The reports had mentioned his name, a civilian, no military background, just an engineer who had seen a problem and solved it. That man, sitting in a warehouse in Maryland, had done more to win the war than any general, more than Eisenhower, more than Patton, because he had given American gunners a tool that let them kill Germans faster than Germans could kill them. War came down to mathematics in the end. Who could put shells on target more accurately, more quickly, with less waste? The gyroscope had changed those equations fundamentally. Pappenheim picked up a folder. The final casualty reports from artillery units, January to April 1945. The numbers were catastrophic. German gun crews destroyed at rates that made sustained operations impossible. Experienced men dying before they could train replacements. Batteries overrun before they could displace. On the Eastern Front, Soviet artillery won through mass. On the Western Front, American artillery won through precision. Either way, Germany lost. He opened his desk drawer. Inside, a Walther P-38 pistol, fully loaded. He had carried it since 1939, never fired it in combat. Strange that he might fire it now, at himself. But no, that was cowardice. He would face what came, another massive explosion. The building shuddered, the ceiling cracked. More dust fell. Pappenheim sat back down at his desk, pulled out a piece of paper, began to write. His last report, the one no one would ever read. To whoever finds this, the Reich has fallen. The reasons are many. Poor strategy, insufficient resources, too many enemies. But among the technical reasons, one stands above others. The Americans developed a gyroscopic sight that gave their artillery a decisive advantage. We recognized this advantage too late and lacked the industrial capacity to counter it. In future wars, armies that neglect such small technological improvements will lose to enemies who embrace them. This is not opinion, this is mathematics. Signed, Major General Rudolf von Pappenheim, 30 April 1945. He folded the paper carefully, put it in an envelope, sealed it, left it on the desk where the Soviets would find it. The artillery fire was continuous now, a rolling thunder that never stopped. Pappenheim wondered if the Soviet gunners knew about the American sights. Probably not. Stalin kept such information tightly controlled, but eventually they would learn. Everyone would learn. The door burst open. Soviet soldiers, 3 of them, young, filthy, rifles raised. Pappenheim stood slowly, raised his hands, said nothing. One of the soldiers saw the American sight on the desk, picked it up, looked at it, shrugged, dropped it. Just another piece of German equipment, meaningless. They took Pappenheim out into the street. The city was unrecognizable. Rubble, fire, bodies. The Reich that was supposed to last 1,000 years had lasted 12 and was ending in ash. Pappenheim looked back once at the building. Somewhere in that basement his report waited, and on the desk a small aluminum rotor lay beside scattered technical drawings. Evidence of a defeat that had been decided not by courage or will or ideology, but by engineering. May 8, 1945. Aberdeen Proving Ground, Maryland. 15-20 hours. William Schneider stood at his office window and watched the proving ground through spring rain. The war in Europe had ended this morning. VE Day, victory in Europe. The radio had been playing celebrations all day. His phone had rung twice. Congratulations from colleagues, mentions of his contribution, words that felt empty because the work had never been about victory. It had been about keeping boys alive. The door opened. Colonel Wade stepped in, uniform soaked from rain, face tired but smiling. "Schneider, they are calling for you at the main building. Press wants to interview the man who built the sight that won the artillery war." Schneider shook his head. "I am not going." Wade frowned. "This is your moment. You deserve recognition." "Recognition does not matter." Schneider pointed at his desk. At the photograph still pinned to the wall. 7 young soldiers, 4 who had come home, 3 who had not. "That matters," Schneider said quietly. 4 came home because a gyroscope spun. 3 did not come home because I was not good enough, not fast enough. There is nothing to celebrate in that." Wade was silent for a long moment. Then he walked to the desk, looked at the photograph. "How many would have come home if you had done nothing?" Wade asked. 0, maybe 1. The site you built gave them a fighting chance. That is all any soldier can ask for." Schneider said nothing, just stared at the rain. Wade set an envelope on the desk. "This came in the mail yesterday, from Germany, Red Cross Channel. Thought you should see it." He left. Schneider opened the envelope. Inside, a letter. German, translated by some intelligence officer. The handwriting was precise, formal. "To the American engineer Schneider. You do not know me. I commanded German artillery units from 1940 to 1945. I studied your gyroscopic sight extensively. It is a work of genius, simple, elegant, effective. You gave your soldiers an advantage we could not counter. Because of your invention, many of my men died. I do not hate you for this. War is war. I write only to tell you that your work mattered. It changed artillery forever. Every army will copy it eventually. You built something that will save lives and take lives for generations. Whether that is good or evil, I do not know. But it is true. Respectfully, R. von Pappenheim, formerly Major General, German Army." Schneider read it 3 times, then set it down beside the photograph. A German general, defeated, broken, still taking the time to write and acknowledge the truth, that the war had been decided not by ideology but by tools, by mathematics, by a small aluminum rotor spinning at 8,000 revolutions per minute. Schneider thought about Pappenheim, wondered if he was alive, wondered if he had survived the fall of Berlin. Probably not. Most German officers had not. He thought about the gyroscope. About 4 months in 1940 when he had tried to do the impossible. 3 failed prototypes. The 4th that worked. The moment when the crew had fired 10 shots and 8 had hit, and he had known, absolutely known, that American boys now had a chance. That was 5 years ago. In that time, roughly 2,400 M1 howitzers with stabilized sights had been built and shipped overseas. They had fired millions of rounds, destroyed thousands of enemy positions, saved thousands of American lives. The numbers were abstract, but the photograph on his wall was not. 4 faces, 4 boys who had come home to families, to futures, to lives, because a gyroscope had spun. Schneider picked up a pen, wrote a reply to Pappenheim. Formal, brief. "General Pappenheim, thank you for your letter. I did not build the site to defeat Germany. I built it to save American soldiers. That it accomplished both does not make me proud or ashamed. It simply makes me tired. The war is over. I hope we never build such things again. But if we must, I hope we build them well. Respectfully, William Schneider, engineer." He sealed the letter, addressed it to the Red Cross, left it on his desk for mailing. Outside, the rain continued. The proving ground was empty, the guns silent. For the first time in 4 years, no one was testing weapons. No one was preparing for war. Schneider sat at his desk and looked at the photograph one last time. Then he took it down, folded it carefully, put it in his drawer next to the letters from Moore, from Kowalski, from dozens of officers who had written to say the site had worked, had saved them, had given them victory. His hands did not shake any more. The work was done. The war was over. But somewhere, in some future conflict, another young engineer would sit at another desk and try to solve another impossible problem. And maybe, if he was lucky, he would remember that the small things mattered, that a 180-gram rotor could change the world. That precision was not just accuracy. It was life. It was death. It was the difference between coming home and not coming home. Schneider turned off his desk lamp, walked to the door, looked back once at the empty office. Then he left and closed the door behind him. The gyroscope had won the war. Now it was time to put it away and hope it would never be needed again. But deep down, Schneider knew better. Wars never ended. They just paused. And when the next one came, someone would remember the lesson of the spinning wheel. That technology could decide battles. That engineering could save lives. That sometimes the smallest invention mattered most. The rain fell. The day ended. And in a quiet office in Maryland, a small piece of history sat in a desk drawer, waiting to be remembered. The gyroscope changed artillery forever. A 180-gram piece of aluminum spinning at 8,000 revolutions per minute gave American gunners an edge that helped win World War II. It let green crews outshoot veterans. It turned precision into a weapon, and it saved thousands of lives. But here is the question. How many other small innovations changed the course of history without most people ever knowing? What other technologies, sitting in warehouses or labs right now, might decide the next conflict before it even starts? Let me know what you think in the comments. Did technology win World War II, or was it the soldiers who used it? Could the Germans have countered this if they had discovered it earlier? What other overlooked inventions shaped the war? If this story surprised you, hit that like button. If you want more deep dives into the technology and tactics that changed warfare, subscribe and turn on notifications. There are dozens of these stories waiting to be told. Thanks for watching. And remember, sometimes the smallest things matter most.